using the microphone up there that's giving the feedback. That's yeah.
Andrew, do we have a phone line calling? President well to the south, which is the American Drive well.
Correct.
Right. Are there currently
Johnson Fort Lopez is upper Spiro, that's correct. On the lower Spiro, it's non-productive in the Belrose 1-10, but we have development in the Johnson direction.
Do you know whether or not the Belrose number 1 was fracked when it was completed? If you know, you know. If you don't, you don't.
I'm sure I'm assuming it's fracked. I don't have the issue.
And would a fracking job in the upper affect the lower load as well, given the proximity of those two loads?
No,
In your opinion, the fracking would not, if you fracked in one load, it wouldn't affect the other?
no.
What's the, how many feet apart are those loads? At least in your Johnson number 1. It looks to me to be about 60 feet apart. You don't think a frac would travel 60 feet?
No, we have a shell and permeable zone in between. And then the highest percentage porosity of the basal is the very base of the sand and with the tiger on top.
Do you have an opinion as to whether the production that the Belrose is seeing in the upper at this point is in fact the same production that the Johnson would see in the upper should you complete it in that load? You're going to be producing the same gas?
Did you understand?
I didn't understand the question. Did you ask that again?
Okay, you know that the Belrose is producing from the upper, and you've got a well log that shows where that is.
Yes,
You're proposing to produce from the upper as well, and my question to you was, if you're producing the upper and the Belrose is producing the upper, are you producing the same gas out of the same formation?
upper, yes.
I saw in your application, on the front page, it talks about your initial production, and then it says that it has not yet been fracked. So you have absolutely, it seems that you intend to frack the Johnson. Do you have an opinion as to whether the fracking of the Johnson would then make these two loads communicate? Would a frack job let gas from the lower enter the upper lobe?
I have those stratigraphically separated.
Well, I mean, if you frack it and you're producing out of
There's
one
a
well
lower
bore,
zone between the upper and the lower. So that,
you can have 2 well bores?
no,
Do you have an opinion as to whether if you are allowed to produce the Johnson in the upper Sparrow, it would affect the production of the Belrose?
that's up to the engineer.
Well, I mean, you're a geologist, you know how this gas moves between rocks, and it's only 1,100 feet apart. Are you gonna,
1,134 feet apart.
okay, so at 1,134 feet, do you have an opinion, based on the qualities of this rock, whether producing from the upper Sparrow is gonna affect the production of the Belrose?
With the low rate of the Belrose, over the 10-year period of time, with less than 75 or around 20 or 30 a day, I would not expect that to drain that much of a radius of the Belrose.
And-
Well, or
And if you are gonna hear testimony in a moment that this well is capable of producing 150 MCF a day, would that change your opinion?
no.
Just for clarification, I want to, again, I'm going to refer to your Form 3 that Oxley filed. And I'm looking at the tubing, or excuse me, the perf job that was done. And I know you don't have this in front of you, so I'm going to represent to you, but this is a form filed with the commission. It says in the zone of 6684 to 6711, you had 18 shots. If I draw that out on your well sounding log for the Johnson, those 18 shots happened right in the middle of the upper lobe. So would you agree with me that most of the production in the Johnson is going to come from the upper lobe? If my representation to you is correct.
Most of the gas from the
I'm sorry, I can't hear.
I'm not sure.
Well, I mean, you shot 9 shots in the lower, you shot 18 in the upper, and you shot 1 or 2 here, 1 or 2 there in your middle red dots on your well log. So given the number of preparations that are in the upper, I'm just asking whether most of the gas is going to come from there.
I'm not sure.
You testified just a moment ago in response to one of my questions that you thought there was some stratigraphic separation between the upper and lower lobe. Given my immediate question that all of most of your perforations are in the upper lobe, would you still maintain that there is separation between the formation in which the Johnson is going to produce as well as where the Belrose is currently produced?
Stratigraphically separated from the upper and lower. The Belrose one has the upper is not productive, the lower to the south, the same reservoir. McBride C1 has both, is productive, I don't know, upper and lower. So we're in communication with the upper spiral in the McBride itself and the Belrose to the west northwest, and then in the lower spiral, we're in communication with the McBride C1 to the south.
I mean, I'm talking about the Belrose, the well that your company doesn't think is economical. Yeah, I think you already answered my question already on that. That's all the questions I have, Mr. Gates.
Questions from the commission?
So Jeff, as you mapped in your regional mapping, did you ever see the porosity of the lower spiral develop any thicker than this?
This, as a matter of fact, this log here in the 6 north tier in the main structure, this is one of the best looking logs qualities that I've seen until you go to the southern portion of.
Yeah, that lower, especially in the.
Yes, and those large, 3 BCF plus reservation orders at Southern Fort Smith will be the tier 7 North 32 West. And those larger, the larger production is when they both upper and lower spirals present.
As you were doing the research, did you ever see people given 2 allowance if they had both zones, or is this just such a unique development porosity in the lower that it just never really occurred?
This is a unique situation.
Do you know, Jeff, if when the zones were perforated, was a pressure test taken on the lower state, or will Mr. Oxley answer that from Mr. Crawford? Okay, we'll wait on that.
You might be about to get that.
Yeah, so
He's
we'll
gonna
get
get that.
okay. Very good. So, I think it's all I can think.
Further questions from the commission? Shannon?
One follow-up. Jeff, Mr. Rankin asked you about a couple of questions having to do with number of births versus amount of production. Are these matters that Mr. Oxley, the engineering witness, would be able to speak to rather than the geologist?
Yes, that's correct.
Because well completion is actually a function of engineering rather than geology.
Correct.
That's all.
All right. Any further questions for this witness? Any other party experts, please?
Michael Oxley, please state your name
I'm Mike Oxley.
and how are you employed?
I'm the CEO of Oxley in Elbert, sole owner of Oxley Energy, and my background is engineering.
And you've in fact been previously qualified as an expert in petroleum engineering.
Yes.
I would like for you to explain first why you believe that it is important that the commission allow Oxley's Johnson number 4-10 well to produce alongside the Belrose, if you will, from an engineering standpoint, dealing with particularly whether if it is not allowed to produce, there will be gas left in the ground and unrecovered.
Do we want to go to certain exhibits? to
Yeah.
Start the testimony?
Yes, and the young lady in the back, if you'll talk about the exhibit numbers, I'm confident she can put it on the screen.
Okay, I think maybe the first place to start could be exhibit number G, or letter G.
I think Director Beal has to.
I'm working here.
Oh, you're the young lady in the
I
back.
don't have a mouse except this.
I got it.
So, have patience.
We have the PowerPoint or we have the visual exhibit. So which one do you want to go to?
Well, exhibit G is not the PowerPoint, it's an economic.
You want to?
We can go on.
Well, this is G, right?
Okay. Okay, so exhibit G is just a summary of the joint interest billings that we've received at Oxley, grossed up to 100%, showing that for the last 2 years since we've owned the well, the well being a Belrose well, a Merit-operated Belrose well, that we are losing money on that well. The total LOE from Merit on this well is shown on average basis at the bottom. For 2020, the average was $2,265 per month, thereby showing a loss of about $1,300 a month for the well. The previous year, it was losing money. And then the 7 years prior to us owning it, a local geologist named John Hudson owned the property, and he lost money from 2010 until we acquired the property. But in terms of the motivation of the parties, we've been, as Oxley, moving ahead to drill wells and develop resources in Arkansas. We've now drilled 11 wells in the last several months. We're the only rig that's been drilling in Arkansas in the last 3 or 4 years. And the motive for drilling is to recover hydrocarbons that otherwise wouldn't be recovered for the benefit of the state and the royalty owners, as well as our operations. In the subject well, the Johnson, the prospect to drill this test was based upon the notion to drill down to the pinters and see if we could find some Woodford gas to determine how much pressure was still in that reservoir. The field itself, being the Bonanza field, is the largest gas field in Arkansas. It's produced nearly a third of the TCF of gas. There's plenty of resources we feel still left to be recovered if we have an active drilling program to develop those resources. When we proposed the drilling of the Johnson number 4, in as much as the Merritt Belrose well, and we'll show another exhibit to depict this, but in as much as that well has, for the previous 10 years, not produced any more than 35 MCF a day. It's produced less than 1 million cubic feet per month after month for over 10 years. And knowing that the AOGC had the rule of 75 MCF a day or less would allow for increased density, it was a no-brainer for us in terms of that being a secondary objective in the drilling of the well, drilling of the Oxley Johnson number 4. So we drilled the Johnson number 4, stepped out from the Merritt, and as our geologists showed, we hit the center of the channel on the upper Spiro. This Spiro sand, we can chase that for 6 to 7, 8 miles all the way up into Count Fort Smith. And then the question that Charlie Wolford asked about the basil is not developed in the nearby area. You can see that it's very prolific. It's got about 20% porosity. It's a very, very, very nice log. It's not present in the Merritt Belrose. It's not completed in the Merritt Belrose. The Merritt Belrose was completed just in this upper sand, and its log was about 1/3 the quality and thickness as is the Oxley Johnson number 4. You can see that it has about 15, 16 feet of bay, and it has around 16 or 17% porosity. Whereas the Johnson log, the Oxley log, you can see that it has about 2.5 times the thickness, and it has about 20% better quality. Its porosity beds out at 24%. Very, very pretty. One of the prettiest logs that you'll find in the ore formation within 20-mile radius. In addition, this basal atoka, the basal member of the Spiro, is stratigraphically separated. It's separated by the shell interval that we can chase geologically all over Arkansas. It's undisputable. And then in addition there too, it has about 50 feet of non-porous sand, 40 or 50 feet of non-porous sand on top of it as a cap. So there's absolutely no permeability between the two sands.
Which exhibit are you holding up?
Beg your pardon?
Which exhibit are you holding up?
This is the
Chemistry log, that'd be page 7 to exhibit page.
Okay. The opposing counsel pointed out that there's another coloring here, but it's not showing up on mine. And that's just showing some porosity of about 6% right on the edge, what we call edgy porosity. So back to the testimony, it's clear to any of us, the Merritt Belrose, which we have a 10% interest in. So we're paying our proportionate share of those losses now for a couple of years. At the previous expenses of $22.65, we're going to hear testimony from the other side that they moved a compressor in. So this does not include the expense of another compressor. And for the purposes of our exhibits, we just estimated $1,000, but I'm sure it's going to be more than that when you consider the lubricants and so forth. It's probably going to be $1,200 or $1,500, but we want to be conservative. So our ongoing expenses going forward are going to be somewhere on that order of $300 per month. their exhibit that I've looked at already, and we'll talk about later, it's gonna show that they have a profit. The reason they're showing that they have a profit is because they're not including all their expenses on that. They're not including the overhead. They're charging $1,650 per month for overhead, whereas we're charging $800. We charge $800 for our overhead, one operating agreement. They're charging $1,650. That's their contract, that's the deal. But that's the expense, and so we're losing money on that well. Our well, the Johnson, when we drilled into it, it made a very nice show, and also by way of letting the commission understand that Merit did elect to go not considering the well, that they were receiving daily drilling reports from Oxley as we drilled the well. They received the logs timely, the day or the day after that we log them by electronics these days. We don't even have to send them by FedEx. So they had the logs, and then they also had the daily completion reports as we produce the well, just like we always do. We issue daily drilling reports, and we issue what we're doing each day. So they had the information to them as early as October when we drilled the well, and then we commenced completion back, say around December. And I'm not sure where the council's leading with regards to maybe hiding any information, but there isn't anything. We've all been transparent. We've been good working interest owners and good relationships with Merit. We think highly of Merit. We consider them good. We consider them allies in the basin. We like them. This situation is a curveball to us because we never ever dreamt that we would have any sort of a challenge whatsoever, knowing that there's a 75 limit, the trailing 12 months of production. My understanding is if a well has not produced more than 75 MCF a day for the previous 12 months, then you have essentially an automatic increase density. And that was the case for this well, not just for 12 months, but for 120 months or 10 years. And so we went on to complete our well, and with regards to any of the engineering questions, I'm here to answer any in all regards to completion and with regards to the perforation. I know that Mr. Walford asked about the reservoir pressure on this lower, this basal. The original reservoir pressure was a little over 1,000 pounds. We're going to show in another exhibit that you have before you the compilation of the volumetric reserves for the lower, which came up to be about 1.6 BCF, and that will show that the well in section 15 has been draining that gas for 20 years or thereabouts, uncompensated for by section 10. So that royalty owners in section 10, the Johnson unit, have been uncompensated for to the tune of up to about 0.8 of a BCF of drainage. It's occurred from this zone in the well in the northeast quarter of 15. We did not measure this pressure separately from the upper. We just assigned 285. And the reason is because when we're completing these wells nowadays, we're the only well, keep in mind, we're the only operator in Arkansas that's drilling any wells. And the reason is because gas prices have been so low that it's incredibly, there's a laser focus on mitigation or minimizing the expense. And so the basin is so dead, it's a graveyard, the Arkoma, that even the service companies, to get the service companies to come in, we can't just, like we did in the old days, drill a well, perforate it, frack it, and go on about our business. What we have to do is drill wells, and we have to plan it in such a way that we can get the trucks in from Oklahoma City or even Texas. We try to do a group at a time so as to mitigate the expense of transporting back and forth the wireline trucks and the frac trucks and so forth. And so also in regards to the commission and our interest in saving money for everyone involved, efficient production, effective production. When we go to complete a well like this, in the old days when we had $10 gas or higher gas prices, we might tend to want to go ahead and complete both zones separately, frack each one of them at $50,000 or $60,000 per zone. But today, with these economics being what they are, we choose instead to limit entry on our perforations and try to frack all together in one job. So The earlier testimony, I think, from council, the opposing council was leading the geologist with a question mark that I could see through that, well, if they perforated this upper zone in the old Belrose, and then they fracked it, which they did, they fracked it in the old days, could it have fracked into that lower? I would say no. Because this well's only going to produce, it's only produced 1.3 BCF, whereas the south offset that has a poorer log in this, but it also has the lower, it's produced twice that amount of gas. It's produced 2 BCF or thereabouts. So secondly, on a stimulation, your stimulation is going to tend to go to the perpendicular of the plane of least principal stress, and the least principal stress was to the channel itself. It's not clearly depicted by just our geologist's map. Let me go on, and I'll just kind of go to one more exhibit, and that would be this exhibit number I. So exhibit I is just a summary exhibit summarizing the volumetric reserves of the geology that you have before you, the isodax. And what it shows is that, starting on the left-hand side, the Belrose, underlying that unit in the upper spiral, there's about 2.099, or call it 2.1 BCF original gas in place. And in the lower spiral for the Belrose, on zero porosity, there's zero gas. And the cumulative production from the Belrose has been 1.34 BCF. As shown on the previous example that Mark Wilson introduced, that has the cumulative production to date of 1.33 BCF. The McBride in section 15, the south offset, you can see that it had originally in place about 3/4 of the BCF, 756 million cubic feet. And the lower spiral had about the same, about 0.76 BCF, or a total of about 1.5 BCF. That well has produced 2.2 BCF, so it has drained from section 10 about a BCF, about 8/10 of the shown at the bottom of the exhibit. That leaves about 3/4 of the BCF in the lower spiral for the Oxley well to drain and to compete against the south offset, the McBride to produce out of that member. And then it also leaves the remainder of the difference between the 2.1 BCF that's underlying the unit and the 1.4 BCF that Merritt's going to testify that they see on their curves, 1.4, 1.5 BCF, that's in the Belrose recoverable. So therefore, that leaves about 4/10 of a BCF in the upper spiral, this upper spiral, to be drained by the Oxley well that otherwise will go unrecovered, because the Belrose well is located on the west edge of a north-south channel, and it's far away from the thaw wind of the channel, and that's evidenced in its production history, where you're seeing it month after month, year after year, making less than 1 million cubic feet per month. We applied for the hearing, never ever dreamt in December that we wouldn't just get administrative approval. What surprised us that Merritt opposed our application to go ahead and complete the spiral. And in as much as, once again, the well was making less than 25 MCF a day, we would have already had the well online back in January, benefited from these high gas prices. But we set the hearing up for January, and then it got postponed for another month, and that's why we're here today. In the last couple of weeks, about 2 weeks ago, Merritt moved in. We didn't get any notification from them as a working interest owner, but they moved a completion review. And it's right next to our well, so we have pumpers that want working there. They moved the completion rig in, and they've got a pumper unit on the well. I guess TXO put it on there years ago to offload some of the load water that is attributable to the production. In our basin, it's a dry gas basin, and it produces about a barrel per million cubic feet typically. And so there was a pumper unit on there, and they went in, and maybe they tell us what they did, but they spent some money on that aspect of it, and then they put a compressor on it. So they've had a compressor on the well for a couple of weeks. It's been interrupted. They're going to try to have us believe that this well is going to be capable of producing, I guess, 150 MCF a day or something more than 75. And from a professional engineering standpoint, I categorically deny that that's even within the realm of possibility, and I'll show you why. We can go into this exhibit here, which is what is that?
That is exhibit J. It's the PowerPoint, and it would be, well, it's exhibit J, and it's probably about
That's it.
second slide.
Right. So that's just an orientation slide. The purpose is just to get us to the next couple of slides. But this is the two slides on the left are just the production from the Spiro in the middle of Atoka that are in the Melrose prior to it becoming commingled. Slide on the right-hand side is the confluence of those and the creation then of the type curve depicting the production profile of the well since it came online in 1994. The next slide, please. Next one. Yes. So there's a kind of a blow up of the last 10 years. So you can see, and we as engineers can see it very clearly. We can see that the smooth profile of the type curve from 1994 trending downwards, and the last point when it falls off in 2011, the well was making less than 75 MCF a day right at that point, and then went sideways, producing about 1 million per month for the last 10 years. The cumulative volume for the last 10 years is about 100 million cubic feet, by the way, about a tenth of a BCF. I'm going to testify, or I can say that that's the Oxley Spiro well, the Oxley Johnson well, is flowing 3/4 million to 1 million to the pit without any frac. So we can produce, said another way, we can produce as much gas out of this well in 1 month than that well can produce in 3 years, 4 years. In 3 months, we can produce as much gas for the royalty owners and all of the interested parties. In 3 months, we can produce as much gas and generate as much revenue as the Belrose did in 10 years. At sub-economic prices, by the way. Sub-economic prices meaning that the product from the Belrose has been less than what the cost has been to us as working interest owners to produce the well. Slide 2, show, if we go to the next slide, please. Okay, so that, what we have done here is standard engineering practice. We plotted now the rate against the cumulative production, and you can see that it follows a smooth line throughout time, and it gets us to the point where we're at where the red dot is. If we go to the next page. Yes, so the exhibit that Merit's going to sponsor is the orange curve, and you can see on its face how exaggerated the production is. The production is starting off at 189 MCF a day. The well hasn't made 189, has not made that amount of gas since almost a BCF ago. So we're dealing with a balloon that had originally 1,000 pounds and now has 285 pounds of pressure. And we're expected to believe that this well, because they put a compressor on it, is going to produce more gas than it produced almost a BCF ago, which goes against any and all common sense. But as you can see on the projection, our projection on the yellow line to the bottom shows what we think the ultimate, the trend of the Belrose is, and the ultimate economic limit of it. It's really lower than what we think it is because it's not, we feel it's an economic limit to us because we're losing money on it. But the economic limit here, we're just honoring their exhibit, just trying to tie the two together where you won't mix apples and oranges at 14 MCF. So you can see the exaggeration on that flow rate here that, once again, just sprung up the last 2 weeks, 3 weeks before we come to this hearing. And so my testimony is that in order to protect the corrosive rights of the unit of Section 10, we need to be able to produce the lower spiral that we discovered, and then we also need to be able to produce our pro rata share of the upper ore, which we don't believe will ever be recovered from the Merritt well that we have a working interest in, because it's below its economic limit. We're losing money on it, and even with a compressor inserted on a well, we all know that has ever produced any gas, that when we put a compressor on, it flows high for a few days and it starts a pretty rapid decline until it gets to matrix permeability. And matrix permeability on this well is going to be somewhere around 40 MCF a day, as depicted by that blue line, consistent with the size of the reservoir. And let me see. And so those are the, again, in sum, we feel like that the Belrose well has about another 100 million cubic feet. It will take about another 10 years to get out at the present rate. Even if they can get 40 or 50 MCF a day out, that extra incremental won't pay for just the compression cost. So we don't see how it's going to be efficient and effective to drain the reservoir for everyone to lose money except for Merritt to produce these reserves. On the other hand, Oxley can produce both zones right now, and we can produce 750,000 to 1 million without frac, and increase royalties to the royalty owners, increase taxes to the state, defend the unit against uncompensated for drainage from the south, and we would ask for the commission to honor our request and to give us your guidance in all sincerity for the go forward if we are to drill a well where we have been losing money for 10 years, that has been producing for less than 1 BCF per month, that has been producing for far less than 75 MCF a day, 30 MCF a day in this case, that we have your assurance as a commission that we can drill those wells and not have to go through this type of testimony again, because we're trying to move the ball forward. We're trying to be proactive to finding new reserves in the state, and we need to have a clear understanding going forward before we spend, so much money drilling these wells, about $750,000 to drill and complete this well. We need to know where we stand, and I think that it probably caught all of you by off guard. Maybe, I don't know. I'm talking to Tom Day, our council here. We were just really surprised. We're surprised we're here. We're sorry that we're here, but we're also thankful we're here because we can look to you to give us guidance. We're here in the best interest of the state of Arkansas and for all of us to work together. And we surely don't want to alienate ourselves from there. We're good friends. I'm pleased that they're there. We've had a lot of operators come and go in the Arkoma Basin. It's one of the best. We like them really well. Get along with them really well. It's sad that we're here having to argue this, but it is a professional argument, and I think that you hear me loud and clear. And I think that it's very simple to see the facts of the matter. It's not that complicated. We engineers can make things really complicated, but when we translate things into dollars, we can all relate to that. And we know for sure, if any of us that's ever invested in a well, if we're losing money every month, it's not economical. We know that. And if it has been uneconomic for 10 years, it's probably going to be uneconomical for 10 more years, especially in light of the fact that it's been depleted now since 1994. So,
Let me ask you just one other question. You talked about how Oxley as a non-operator is losing money, and you display your actual bills of revenue to prove that. What about the royalty owners? Do the royalty owners get any significant bumps out of this railroad?
not really. I mean, they're getting a 1/8 override, and the railroad's making about $1,052,000 per month, or say, call that $2,000, so getting about $100 per month.
$100 a month,
Yeah.
spread over 40 acres.
Right. Well,
640 acres.
right, over 640. As contrasts with ours, our well will make about 30 times that.
Absolutely.
Rankin.
Mr. Oxley,
Yes, sir.
you started off your testimony with talking about how the rule would be, I think what you said was should be an automatic increase in density, where you have a well that produces less than 75 MCF per day over a 12-month period. I think it's important, and I hope the commission and your council and you will indulge me to actually read what this rule says. In Rule D19G, and then it goes through G1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Each one of those has an or after, which means any of these would be a reason to grant an additional completion. You're proceeding under number 5. And number 5 says, as one reason for granting an additional completion, the other unit completion in the common source of supply has produced less than 75 MCF per day over the 12-month period prior to the additional completion being sought, being drilled, which is the subject of the application before the commission. And then there's the word and, which is followed by, and which is only able to produce less than 75 MCF per day absolute open flow. My question to you is, as you sit here today, do you know whether the Belrose is able to produce 75 MCF today?
I don't believe that it's able to produce 75 MCF a day on a consistent basis.
That's not what I'm asking. I'm asking you today, do you know whether it's producing over 75 MCF?
Yesterday it produced a little over 100 MCF.
So right off the bat, your request violates this rule in that it said you do have a well that is able to produce 75 MCF a day.
Not on an average for 12-month period.
I understand, but that's not what this rule says.
Well, I must have misinterpreted the rule. I was there on my council.
Well, it's a conjunctive phrase. Yes, 12-month period, but then it also says, which is only able to produce less than 75 MCF per day absolute open flow. And you just testified that yesterday it produced what?
About 100 for the day, but that's after the well's been shut in.
I'm gonna ask you about the shut-in here in just a minute. Following 5 though, which all of the ones before were followed by the word or, which means either one of those could apply. 5 is followed by the word and, which means 6, the next paragraph is mandatory. If ownership within the wells and the common source of supply within the unit is not common, but evidence of agreement between the parties is provided. So this rule, in order to allow you to do an additional completion, when you have a well that produced less than 75 MCF per day over a 12-month period, and which was not capable of producing 75 open flow, you have to have an agreement to be able to get an additional completion done.
Objection. Mr. Rankin is essentially asking this witness to interpret the rules, which is a legal conclusion. I'll argue with him what the rule says, because
I'm going to allow the question because Mr. Oxley, in his testimony, gave what his opinion of the rule was. So I'm going to allow the question.
Yeah, it's my opinion that we proposed a well and that Merritt didn't want to participate in the well, so we totally up 100% of the drilling and completion of this well and drilled the well. And then we go to complete the well, and pursuant to that, the rule, the existing well has never made, for the last 10 years, 75 MCF a day on average for a 12-month trailing period, and it's not capable of doing that going forward. It's capable of doing maybe, any of these wells, any well in the Oklahoma might flow 500,000 a day.
All right, Mr. Oxley, I don't mean to cut you off. I don't think you answered my question, but I'm going to withdraw it because I think maybe your counsel's right. We can make that argument to this commission once all the proof's put on. But clearly the wording of the rule requires that there be an agreement. And if there is no agreement, one, the director can't issue an additional completion on your administrative. But if there is no agreement, this rule says you can't have an additional completion. So
And I think that's one thing I want to point out, that we're talking about the rule for administrative approval by staff without the need of hearings. So, which is why we're here at this point.
I understand. I guess I was going to say this to the end, however, but the last paragraph also says that you can ask for a hearing before this commission if the reason for the additional request is not covered by the rules. Well, it is covered by this rule. This rule specifically says that you can get an additional completion if you have a well that only able to produce less than 75 MCF a day. He just testified that it produced 150.
You're close, move on.
Let's talk about the last 10 years, Mr. Oxley. You're aware that Merit's only owned this well for the last year, correct?
Year, 2 years, something like that. I think maybe they took it over, I'm not sure. You can.
If I represent to you that it's for a year, would you have any reason to disagree?
No.
The numbers that you have been providing and the numbers you've used to attack their well have been over the history, and you made a big statement that over the last 10 years, you've lost a lot of money on this well. Did you ever, or did anybody with your company ever approach XTO about the uneconomic nature of this well?
No, we didn't.
So it didn't bother you then, it only bothered you when you drilled this well.
Well, no, it's been bothering. We have an interest in about 500 Merit wells, and we're losing money on 360 of them. So do you want me to start bothering them on 360? I don't think so.
Well, I just think it's sorry to talk over you. Thank you for answering my question.
Mostly of which it's because of the overhead. Their overhead's about twice. Their overhead rate's 1,600. I think the commission, if we have if we propose a well and get we integrate, they establish it at 750. So,
Let me ask you about your losing money on the well, and you mentioned in your testimony to start with, you said that was due to the overhead rates. Aren't those part of the COPUS, which is part of the JOA governing machines?
It's due to all of the overhead rates, the pumping rates, now the compression rate. I know that we're charging $3,300 a month over in the next door neighbor section.
I'm asking specifically about.
3,300, I think, per day.
I'm asking specifically about the COPUS that you put a number of $1,650, and you said that you're losing $1,650 a month. But I thought that your ownership interest in this well is only 10%. Is that correct?
Well, I went on to say that we have a 10%, a little over a 10% working interest. Yes,
So you're being charged $165 a month for the COPUS rate overhead on this well. Okay, is that accurate?
Yes.
If you take off that $165 a month, does this well pay you?
I don't think so. I would have to verify that.
We'll get to that in our testimony. As a petroleum engineer, when you talk about the upper Spiro and the lower Spiro, both of those are considered to be part of the ward formation, are they not?
Yes.
So for classification, when you propose a well or anything else, there's nothing within the commission rules that would actually say that the lower Spiro is a different formation than the upper Spiro is.
Don't know that for sure. I think Mr. Lyon or some geologists can testify that it's very possible that in various parts of the basin, we have them broken out as basal Atoka or basal ore and upper ore. As we do in the middle of Atoka, we break them out into 5 or 6 different names. So it's very likely that it's classified into different names in different parts of the basin.
But they are both parts of the ore. I think you answered that correct.
Well, they're part of that age of time, that base Wacoma age, that's clearly separate and distinct channels, clearly. Stratigraphically separated, however you'd like to define, a separate and distinct reservoir from the reservoir that's.
But you perforated both of them.
Yes, we did.
In fact, you put twice as many parts in the upper that they're producing out of than you did the lower.
That's because it's twice as thick. And so we try to perforate our wells in such a way as to have limited entry by our perforations for our frac job in order to discover a frac job proportionately.
But you perfed the well when you knew their well was producing from it.
Yeah, because we had no reason to not believe that there would be anything but just an administrative order that we would produce this well. And as much as that their well that we're losing money on has been producing less than 25 MCF a day for 10 years.
90% of which was operated by another operator that you didn't complain to.
And your operating expenses have gone up since XTO operated it. XTO operated it for $1,570 per month for overhead, and you've gone up 100.
I think I'll have some competing testimony on that.
That'll be fine because these are based upon the invoices that we're receiving.
Well, you talk about the jibs. Are you current to date in your jib, Mr. Merritt?
I beg your pardon?
Are you current in your jib payment, Mr. Merritt?
Yes. We are, with one exception. We've got an exception that just now got resolved because of you taking over XTO and us taking over Vanguard going bankrupt twice. And we just got clearance from XTO and Merit that there's about $200,000 on code that we can now pay to either XTO or Merit. I think it's Merit. I think they finally decided in their post-closing adjustments where those monies are due. But no, we're in compliance with Merit. We do all within file. We don't have any disputes with Merit, except for this right here. This really isn't a dispute. This is a curveball that none of us ever saw coming. I don't think as long as I've been in Maricopa Basin since the 70s have I ever been hit with such a curveball out of nowhere for no reason.
You talked about that your initial target. Now, I think this was your testimony. I made a note that it was going down to the Pinter.
Yes.
Did you testify that? Is that where, and I'm not a geologist or an engineer, is that near the Hunting?
Yeah, the Pinter's hunting.
Okay, and did you in fact drill to the Pinter?
Yes, we did.
And I noticed that you only gave this commission the logs for that area of the Spiro. Did you show anything in those initial target zones that showed to be a prospect?
I'm sorry.
Any of the other zones that you went through, were they prospective? Could they have produced an economic amount of gas?
No, the Hell Zone's tight, but it sets us up for possible redrill. We may take another shot at some point in another section because we learn as we drill wells. Mr. Wonder can attest to that. And as far as the Pinter's hunting, the Pinter's is the most prolific zone in Arkansas. It's produced over 80 BCF out of that Pinter's structure on Bonanza. It's a Pinter's chert, and that gas we feel is being sourced by the Woodford, which has been a developing play in Pittsburgh County and over in the Oklahoma side. And so we took the opportunity to test that for scientific purposes for the consideration of future drilling and development of Woodford resources for the state of Arkansas.
So I think your answer to my question as to whether any of the other formations were prospective was no. So then you backed out, decided to perf the one zone already being produced out of Merit.
We didn't back out. We intentionally in the front end of this thing for probably several years have eyeballed the potential of a Spiro or and possibly a Hell producer in this section. As far as the go forward, you'll see us applying for more drilling operations as we move these channels to the north towards Smith.
That's interesting because you just said it. We're going to see this again. You're going to come in and you're going to drill a well in an area that's already being produced under field rules, under well spacing rules that have been long accepted by this commission, and you're just going to go drill wells and then come ask for forgiveness.
No, we're going. We didn't think that we needed to ask for forgiveness
Because you misinterpreted the rule.
Well, maybe maybe my attorneys misinterpreted, maybe we're all misinterpreting what economic production is. But I see an uneconomic production at 25 MCF a day, and I see it because I'm having to write checks every month for the well.
Where in D19 does it talk about the economics of well?
You'll need to dispute that with my counsel, because that's why.
Well, that's my point.
I'm an engineer and a geologist and a businessman, but I'm not an attorney. I'm relying upon counsel and the commission to adjudicate this issue. And it doesn't.
Mr. Robinson,
Yes, sir.
I don't mean any against about this, but you can't have it both ways. You can't testify one way and then when you're asked questions, stand behind
Fine.
the interpretation given by counsel. We will discuss the legality or the interpretation should something. If you don't know, just say you don't know. Please don't then make statements as to, you can't have it both ways.
All right, and I don't intend to, I'm sorry.
Mr. Ray, we're gonna run out of time, so I need you to hurry up if possible.
A couple more questions. Let me ask you this way, Mr. Oxley. If you own the Belrose well and another operator proposed the Johnson well, and you knew that your well produced more than 75 a day, would you pay to participate in a well that was going to produce out of the formation you were producing out of?
Yes.
You would pay money to get gas out of a formation you're already getting it out of?
Yeah, because it's quite clear that there's a stratigraphic interval of the upper that is not in the existing borehole, and it's quite clear that this well is capable of producing 20 times more gas per day than is this Belrose. So I've done it many times in Oklahoma where we have infill drilling, and I've done it many times in Arkansas where we're doing infill drilling on 40s on the Millatoka Reservoir in Logan County. And
Mr. Oxley, I hate to cut you off, but they're telling me I need to hurry, so if I cut you off because I don't think you're answering me, that's fine, or if you've answered, I want to move on because I got a couple more questions to ask you. You testified that your well produced at 750 MCF, it's in your application. How long did you produce that well to determine that was your initial production?
Well, we've only produced it a couple of days.
Okay, thank you, that's what I needed to know. You've done it for 2 days. You haven't done
I
a,
don't know, 2 or 3 or 4 days, whatever. It
you
would be in the drilling reports that that's a copy of.
real quickly, I want to talk about your curve that you've got in front of the commission right now.
Sure.
At the point where where your gray line flattens out and it produces around 30 MCF for the last 11 years, do you know why it flattened out?
I'm sorry.
Do you know why the production in this well flattened out 11 years ago? Do you know?
Do I know why it flattened out?
What caused it to dip and then flatten out, and why hasn't it produced more than it? Do you know why that is?
No.
If there's going to be testimony that there's a water column on top of this thing, 500 to 1,000 foot thick, and you put a pumper in there and you remove the water, and then all of a sudden your gas production shoots up to 150, would you find that unreasonable?
Yes.
And then for the time that water column has blocked the gas, wouldn't you then seek to recover that because that gas hasn't been produced? That would be indicative of why the orange line shoots up that high. Is that a reasonable
I
explanation?
just want to know how long the pumper unit's been out there. I'm sure XTO put it out there many years ago, so.
And I'm gonna get to that. I'm asking you as an engineer whether it is unreasonable, my proposition.
Yes.
It's unreasonable for the water to hold the gas in for 11 years to affect the production.
I don't believe that that's been the case for 2 years.
Did you examine and do the work over on this well, on the Belrose?
No.
And finally, your application seeks to protect the correlative rights, but it says of the applicant and the royalty owners. Would you agree with me that your other working interest owners in this unit also share the same protections of correlative rights?
Yes.
In producing gas from a formation that already has a well in it, that would violate those rights, would it not?
No.
I'll pass it.
I have one quick question.
Hold on. Let me give the commissioner an opportunity to ask questions before we come back to your.
Right.
follow-up questions? All right, you're up. Excuse me, Commissioner.
I'm not a geologist or engineer, I just, for me, go in an isolation tool on the new well and test the lower zone for pressure and look at that. The one at Bose, I'm looking for what I've seen. I see that could almost be inverted formation and if they got true pressure on it that was isolated. It would, I would think from a geological separation standpoint, to kind of resolve the question. But otherwise, it seems like they're all, that would be, to me, be a simple answer. Shut in pressure on the two zones. And then another thing, from, not so much from here, but it's coming up, we're, in our coalition, we're about to have a nightmare with companies buying small interests in wells and jacking up administrative overheads, that basically, they're making $1,000 a month or $1,500 a month on administrative overhead, and the wells are not even paying for themselves. And we've kind of historically not protected non-operators under the JOA, which is kind of what was also talked about on the merit of the 500 wells and 360 were not taken on. But that's for another thing. That's just something I'm concerned about. That would make any sense.
So, I tell you what, let's come back. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna give Mr. Daly an opportunity to ask his follow-up questions. And then we're gonna take a short recess to give Patricia a break. I know she's trying to catch up with everybody. And then we're gonna come back and if there's any possibility of, the two sides agreeing to what you're talking about as a possibility, maybe they can discuss that on our recess. Does that work for you? Jalen?
Two quick questions, Mike. This Rankin made a big deal that, apparently now that, Barrett has, thrown up this Hail Mary at the very end of the game. They have achieved, at least temporarily, rates, for a couple of days in excess of 75 a day. And he was, I think, misinterpreting, Rule D-19 and saying that the commission absolutely cannot grant an application. And then one of his but-fors was, if a well ever produced over 75 a day. So my question to you was, even though I don't agree with his interpretation, was there ever a day, according to the production records, the Arkansas Oil and Gas Commission, before you filed this application, that well produced over 75 a day, except prior to May of 2010?
Now, I don't object to that question simply because it mischaracterizes my question to him. I never said just because the well ever produced it. I'll just say that the rule reads as the rule reads. Those weren't my words.
Stanley, any other questions?
One quick one. To both the Belrose well, does the Belrose well also produce from the Millitoba Formation, commingled in with its sour development?
Yes,
And do you in fact have a Millitoba completion to produce in the Johnson 4 well also?
yes, Johnson 4, Johnson 5, and Johnson 3.
And because of General Rule B-44, there's no issue about your right to produce from Millitoba.
Correct. We have as many as maybe 15 Millitoba producers in the adjoining section 11.
No.
Thanks, Director Pringle has a question for Mr. Oxley.
Just a quick question, Mr. Oxley, in your opinion,
Yes, sir.
in your opinion, what will be the impact on Belrose well if in fact the Johnson well produces both of them in the same zone?
No impact. I think that the state and the well, I think our well will produce about a BCF of gas, and I think that the Belrose will ultimately produce about 100 MCF, about 10 BCF of gas.
Thank you.
Unless the commission has any questions, we're going to stand in recess for 10 minutes.
That's right.
Just, yeah, just to clarify one question.
Yeah. Excuse me. Tim? Maybe, we couldn't hear you. Excuse me. Sorry, we couldn't hear you. So Tom was asking me, were you proposing that, we couldn't hear what you were saying. You proposed a shared allowable where?
It's gotta have a lot of gas.
Hey there, are you on your phone? Did you see that message? Can you go straight to that? Then you can go on and get it. Because I've never hosted one before. So she's gonna do it. Yeah, she's gonna be host. I don't know how to do this. So she's gonna call and get it set up. So can you go pay me? I haven't. Well, I don't know how awkward it is, hosting on the you know, I'm a little concerned about that logistics. And it's Rick Berry, Dr. Amon, and Laura Beth on the other part. But we've got into a battle here. Until today. In North Little Rock. Yeah. Right. Kind of good to see the kid, and they're trying to run each other, but, you I don't have the complete case now, but it's a working case. And they asked me to host it. Just so that main part could do it. And I thought I was just. I know. Absolutely. In the meantime, can you just go to my house? Can be. Yeah, I mean, that's the way we work sometimes. Well, they took a break specifically for me to do this. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, 3:45. Yeah. If I'm not walking in the door by that time, then just go on with it. Oh, no. Once you get started, I want you to do the whole thing because I don't want to create that kind of stuff.
And what those.
Well, she's not overly conversant. And it's, the information is on my Toshiba laptop, not the other one, not the Dell, the Toshiba, the one I use regularly. She knows all that. There's a copy of the paperwork in front of my calendar. And it has a yellow sheet where I took notes and then actually the information that I got from Zen, and she knows where the password is. Okay. Yeah. Right. Okay, but you're gonna be there in the office. Okay. Sure. Well, you should be there though by the time she sent that invite. You'll be there at 1:45. Yes. Well, and see what I was thinking though. If you need to be there when she sends the invitation out, because then they're gonna be responding and opening up, and she doesn't have a place in this. You know, you need to be the one to do the response. Won't they sign in? I mean, the invitation normally they've all had the invitation. Oh, yes, they've all had the invitation for ages, so they'll just file in to, you know, the email address that anyway. Right. It's a series of numbers and stuff. If she can. I don't know, why don't you just try to get, why don't you just try to get there by 1:45 so that. Right. Oh. Right. Oh, yeah, I do. Okay. And all I need to tell her is to just do be Parker just like she's doing an email. Okay. But, yeah, you'll be looking at it, yeah. And I mean, you can sit at my desk and move the paperwork off the Dell computer and set your computer right down on top of it. Sorry to be so confusing, but, you know, my mind is on a totally different track. And this is down under 60. So I'm kind of befuddled. Okay. All right, I'm gonna let you go and call her and tell her that you're gonna be there. And then y'all work it out. I mean, yeah, I mean, you can do it with the copy machines right there, so. Oh, okay, we can do that too, okay. 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 Right. Okay. Thank you, you saved me. Okay.
What time do you have to leave? 3:30?
Yeah, I need to leave at 3:30.
There's February. 9 years. And then you showed up and said, what did y'all do? I said, I've heard that many times.
So we took care of it, we were, I can't believe it. Well, the first one, we're going to you could write about the Lord, working together.
How you trying to get some? Yeah.
All right, you ready? All right, we're gonna go ahead and get started. We have the availability of the court reporter for another 40 minutes, which sometimes she's got to leave, but we never anticipated we have this long a hearing. So we're going to try to finish what we can today in the next 40 minutes. In a matter to expedite this, I probably should have done this a long time ago, but I didn't really realize we were going to have a discussion about the rule and what the rule means. To me, I guess I'm going to make this in the form of a ruling from the administrative hearing officer, and that is, this situation that we're here today D19 does not apply to that situation. D19 was only intended to apply to situations in which the director can issue additional at an administrative level. D19A, which is up on the screen now specifically, I think spells that out and says this rule is applicable for administrative approval by the director of production and conservation of additional completions within common sources supply within established dwelling units located in fields covered by field rules. So if you met the criteria in this rule, then it could have been done administratively. There is no doubt in my mind that you don't meet the criteria, simply because you don't have an agreement, you have different ownership involved. At this point in time, Oxley is bringing an application, asking the commission for an additional completion. Oxley's moving party, they have the burden of proof of demonstrating the need for the additional completion. So for the commissioner's benefit, I don't believe that D19 and whether or not what the wording of D19 actually even applies at this point, simply because we're talking about a circumstance that is clearly outside of D19. You're both welcome to challenge that ruling if you want. I know in the past we've allowed those to be appealed directly to the commission, but I think at this point, in my opinion, we're not talking about what D19 does or does not authorize. We're talking about whether or not there is a need or a creation of waste one way or the other with the additional completion that's being requested here today. So given that, I would like to move our direction of our testimony and discussion we're having away from what D19 could require administratively, because that's not the situation we're in. Mr. Rankin, I think we're to your point of presentation of your exhibits and application. I don't know that we've identified it. I also have an email from Kyle D. Parker, and I'm a little bit confused by it. I don't know if you've seen it, either one of you have seen it, but it is, I think it's clearly applicable to this. It's an email from Kyle D. Parker saying, I'm representing my mother, our attorney, Loretta Parker, a 0.8% royalty interest owner in the matter before the commission. Strongly recommend that you approve the application of Oxley Energy LLC in docket number 105 2020-12 for an additional allowable well, the spiral formation by Oxley, what is known as the Johnson number 410 well. To date, the royalty income from Merit Energy Company has been marginal at best for the last several days. It is my desire that all wells produced in the formation should benefit the royalty interest owners. I think it clearly is applying to this application, although it's an incorrect reference to the document. Typically accept these as Commission Exhibit 1. I guess I will give either or Mr. Daly and Mr. Rankin an opportunity to object to the introduction of this email as Commission Exhibit 1. Taylor, do you have any objections?
I do not have any objection.
Mr.
It's
Rankin?
the only Oxley application on the docket. It's obviously a record.
I believe 105 was a flywheel application, specific enough by subject matter that I'm allowed in the commission exhibit. All right, Mr. Rankin, let's identify your exhibits and your witnesses.
Well, I guess in response to your question about this email, I just asked that it be given the weight we would give it. And this email, we don't know who it came from. I don't know who Kyle Parker is. He's one guy. We don't know who asked him to send that email. So, but with that, if it comes in, I don't have anything there.
Fair enough.
We did submit our objection, attached to our objection, our exhibit 1, the letter from Jay Hanson denying the permit to produce from that location and sending them to the full commission under B19. Merit exhibit number 2 is a table we will go over. Exhibit 3 is another table. Exhibit 4 is another table. 4A is a graph, point graph. Exhibit 5 is a table that we will explain. I also submitted as an exhibit, I don't have it numbered 6, but I'd like to identify as merit number 6, being the CV of Matthew Garvin. He is joining me at the table. I wanted to give that, and I think I emailed that to Mr. Curry yesterday. And then I also handed out merit exhibit number 7, which is another table which was worked on last night after we received the exhibits from Mr. Daly yesterday, and I got it this morning from my client. We're proposing that all the exhibits that are attached to the application be introduced into the record.
Mr. Daly, you have any objections?
We'd also move for the recognition of Mr. Matthew Garvin's expertise in the field of geology.
Motion is granted, your exhibits are accepted into the record. Mr. Garvin's qualification was set out in his resume. Was this given an addition, a document, an exhibit number?
No, and I want to identify it as merit number 6 if we keep in line with the numbering that I've got.
All right, we'll accept that as, your exhibit 6, Mr. Garvin, based on both experience and education, is qualified to deal with petroleum geology with your expertise. You can have 2 witnesses.
I am also appearing at the table with me is also appearing at the table is Mr. Gary Hennigan. Mr. Hennigan's expertise in the field of petroleum engineering was first recognized in document number 50-2020-06. We moved for the recognition of this expertise by incorporating that document.
Motion is granted, his qualifications and recognized incorporated herein. Would you vote, please raise your right hands. You swear or affirm to tell the truth?
Yes. Yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Garvin, let's start with you. Could you state your name, please?
Matthew Garvin. And how are you employed, Mr. Garvin? I am a senior geologist working at Merit Energy.
In your duties at Merit, have you become familiar with the geology surrounding the Belrose well?
Yes, very familiar.
And have you had the opportunity to examine the geologic items and exhibits that have been submitted by in this application?
Yes, I have.
Let me cut to the chase, Mr. Garvin. Based on your review of those exhibits and based on your expertise that has just been recognized, do you have an opinion as to whether allowing production from the Johnson well will adversely affect the production in the Belrose well?
Yes, I do.
And why do you feel that way?
I am confident that the production from a gas well in a conventional source of supply, 1,134 feet away from the existing producer, is going to have an adverse impact on the existing Belrose one producer.
The application states that they intend to frack this well, and it's already had a showing of 750 MCF just when they basically turned it on. By fracking it, will that also adversely affect the Belrose well?
Yes, it is very possible that it will adversely affect the Belrose well.
Your opinion based on their exhibits and your expertise, would fracking that well Could that possibly lead to a communication between the upper lobe and and the lower lobe in the spirit?
Yes, the shell in between the upper lobe and the lower lobe is only 5 feet thick. Cracks have been known to travel vertical distance, especially in fractured basins.
And do you know about whether the Belrose well, whether that well was fracked when it was completed?
Yes, it was fracked.
It was fracked. And can state with any reasonable degree of scientific certainty that because of that frack, that the Belrose is not producing out of the lower spirit?
No, I cannot, and on the exhibit, they have identified that there is some net reservoir in the lower spiro in Belrose 1.
When you talk about the exhibit, I want to draw the attention of the commission to the you're talking about this well, this exhibit?
That's the Johnson Boys End.
I mean, this is, the next is the Melrose?
Yes, where the red,
The lower red.
yes, where the lobe is colored in.
So you actually have development in the Melrose in the lower spirit.
Yes, and in the net sand maps for both the upper and lower spiro, they both show that they are not stratigraphically separated from each other in either residence or structure. But
You're aware of the recent pump repair that was done on Belrose, are you not? Is that going to aid in the recovery of the reserves that are the subject of this application?
yes, sir.
And based on the spacing requirements of B44, one well per common source of supply, is it your opinion as to the Belrose ability to develop and fully produce those that reserve?
Yes.
That's what.
Mr. Garvin, are you testifying that it's your opinion that the Belrose is going to drain all of the remaining reserves within the Johnson unit from the spiral formation?
Definitely from the upper spiral. It has been producing. It has produced 1.3 BCF today. The well has been underperforming for 10 years, which they're going to discuss later, and it will continue to produce for many years to come. The lower spiro may not possibly drain those reserves. But as it said, the McBride C1 to the south has already drained many of those reserves. It actually was drilled in 1981. The Belrose well was drilled in 94. The McBride C1 was a virgin reservoir when it was drilled in 81.
And so basically you just testified that we have a well to the south, which isn't in this unit, it's drained this unit.
It's quite possible, yes.
But you don't want the Oxley well to produce competition with the McBride.
The Oxley well is trying to produce the reserves that the Belrose well is currently and actively producing.
But the Belrose well is not. I think we agree on one thing, the Belrose well is not currently actively producing from the lower.
I will defer that to conversation that Garrett will have. Oh, I'm sorry, on the lower. I think it's quite possible that frac grew and that we've had some contribution from the lower spiro.
Well, I think I'm looking at the same exhibit that you were looking at a minute ago. And you not only have shale, but you have, about 60 feet of tight rock between those two.
Yes.
And you think that, do you agree with Mr. Oxley's testimony that hydraulic fractures typically run perpendicular to the level? The area of principal stress?
That's in line.
Okay.
The offset well is only 1,100 feet away.
I'm not talking about the Johnson wells proposed fracture treatment. I'm talking about your fairly astounding testimony that somehow or other XTO or Revere or whoever it was that first drilled the Belrose managed to frack down to the lower low and put it into production.
Well, let me put the wording as this. It is impossible to say that the fracture did not reach down to the lower low, and there has been some contribution in production from that lower low.
I think that you have so qualified as to make it accurate. It's virtually impossible to say anything absolutely.
Well, I believe that the comment earlier was that the shale was a definite frac barrier, and I don't believe we have the data to support that.
You and the engineers who work for Merit, as well as the geologists and engineers who work for Oxley, never had absolute knowledge of anything, do you?
That's why we are qualified with our experience and to come to the table and offer
All
our
right, so then I'm
presentations.
going to ask you a direct question, and I would like a direct answer. Is it your opinion that the Belrose well has fracked into the lower level?
I think it is possible.
That wasn't the question. Has it happened?
Stanley, I believe you
I
answered the
think we
question.
have to, yeah.
The point is that he expressed an opinion, he had no idea.
You have further questions, Mr. Stanley?
No, I don't.
What's that?
I don't have to.
Questions for this witness from the commission? Commissioner Wolf?
Mr. Garvin, were Oxley to be limited to production only of the lower level, would Merit have an issue with that?
I think that that is something that we could potentially discuss. But as of now, the upper lobe has been perforated and stimulated.
So if the impact were set above the lower low,
I would have to revert to my engineers to determine whether that's operationally sustainable and capable.
okay, so to follow up on a comment that Commissioner Smith made earlier, were Oxley required to perform a pressure test on that lower lobe, and if a pressure differential was indicated between the two lobes, would that help Merit with the decision as to allow the basal part of the spiral?
I don't believe an allowable in the upper spiral would be very favorable for
Yeah, I'm just talking about lower.
just the lower slope. I think that's something that should have been discussed before December 22nd when they perforated and stimulated it. To be completely honest with you.
Sorry.
Thank you. Further questions? Ready to call your next witness?
I'm going to call Mr. Garrett Hennigan. Mr. Hennigan, could you state your name, please?
Gary Hennigan,
And how are you employed, Mr. Hennigan?
Region Manager, Marconi East Region for Merit and Company.
All right, in your duties for Merit, have you become familiar with the Belrose well, the surrounding unit, and the application of Oxley in this case?
I have.
All right, I want to talk about, I want to skip past the letter from the AOGC. But to go to Merit's exhibit number 2, which is this black table printed off and as visible as best we can. In getting to this exhibit, could you explain to the commission about how Merit came in to own the Belrose and then what you have found in the Belrose since your ownership has come about?
Absolutely. We acquired these assets from XTO and took over operations in January of 2020. So we've operated them a little bit over a year. In July, in the July or early 2011 range, the Belrose 1-10 experienced a pump failure. And at that time, production dropped from 75 to 28 MCF per day, where it's held fairly flat over the last decade, as Oxley pointed out. If you want to take a glance at the next exhibit, number 3, I think this might help my point a little bit. As an engineer, whenever you flip through the curves on an asset like this where you acquired 1,000 wells, can you see a curve like this where it drastically dropped off 10 years ago and has not declined at all over a 10-year period of time? This is money to be made. It is clearly loaded, it's clearly showing signs, that's not a natural decline, it's showing characteristics of being loading, and as soon as I took a look at this, it's obvious to see this well is liquid load. So Merit took over operations in 2020. We instantly identified all of the wells that look like they're underperforming or neglected, and then we high-grade that list, and then we go down the list and work on from there. Merit's in the business of buying mature, somewhat depleted assets that need attention, and this is what we do well. Obviously, last year we were faced with some pretty difficult pricing environments, and some jobs like this maybe didn't get done. This one clearly didn't get done last year. We have many of these stacked up that we plan to do over the next several years or longer as we own the asset. The first thing we did is we went to this well that has a pumping unit on it that XTO did install, and we tried to turn the pumping unit on and see if it has any pressure. Immediately, there was no pump action, there was no pressure at surface. The unit was not running, it was not moving any fluid. So dead giveaway, it needed a pumping unit at one point. It has the pumping unit doesn't run now. It's a pretty good indication of why the well is only making 30 MCF per day. At that time, we went forward and we shot a fluid level on the well, and there was a significant column of fluid above the perforations, which further supports, okay, there's pressure and more gas here. There's more pressure than the well showing, there's more gas, and this well has the capability of producing more gas than it is currently. I believe the 30 MCF per day that's been producing the last 10 years is just gas that's been able to migrate through the water column. So moving forward, we've got this well on the list of wells to work on. And on February 4th, we set a test compressor on the location to see how the well performed under lower line pressure conditions. The line pressure went from 47 PSI to 20 PSI and increased production from 34 MCF per day to 168 MCF per day. At that point, it was clear that this well had more to offer. We moved the workover rig on location on February 9th to pull and replace the pump and inspect the tubing for holes. We found that the pump was seized up and the sand stream was scaled over and mud anchor was filled up. We ran back into the new pump and a bottom hole assembly, and the well has been producing over a barrel a day since. Production at that time jumped to 236 MCF per day. That's what you'll see on Exhibit 2, is basically the production that we've seen in the last 90 days. So we've only had this well for a year. This is exactly why we like to buy assets like we would buy, because there's potential like this. It's low-hanging fruit, as we like to call it, that you can go into easily and spend a minimal amount of investment to get it back up to its potential. If you look at Exhibit 3, we have 10 years of down production. Even if we repaired this well and we didn't get any flush production from the well being down over the last 10 years, it would at least come back up to the 40 MCF per day if we don't capture any loss reserves. So at that time, we put the pump in the well, as you can see in Exhibit 2, and it came up to 237 MCF per day. Next stage dropped off as we had problems with the gas engine running. Had ran for 10 years, so we had to work some kinks out. For the first 5 days after that pump was running, this well produced 189 MCF per day. And in the Arkoma Basin, that is a great well. This well still hasn't pumped off to our knowledge. After that time, you can see that the winter weather hit us. So the last 4 days on this plot is decreased production because the pump unit compressor couldn't run as it froze up. We've gone back and we've got that back up and running. And as it recovers, the last 2 days, we've averaged about 180 MCF per day. So to say that this well is not capable of producing 75 MCF per day, I believe is completely false. And I believe this will be a good well for a long time to come, based off of other successes we've seen in the basin across our now 1,500 operated wells.
The future production of this well, is that indicated on one of your exhibits, or were you?
Correct, Exhibit 3. This is basically an area plot of historical production, and then the red curve above is where the well is producing at now. Again, we only have a limited amount of data on this, but the well's not pumped off yet. It could only go up from here. This could very much be a conservative load. But I'll also point out the curve is prior to 2011. If you look really from 2000 really the entire time the well's produced. It's had very sporadic production, which shows any engineer that looks at this well has always had issues with loading. This is something that we think we can address, and we've taken steps to do so, and we're already seeing the results from that. This is a conservative look on the curve that we forecasted on here, where the well is at today, and declining back and getting down to its historical trend using the same B factor in terms of declines as the well would have done. What you'll also see on Exhibit 3 is just some simple economics with a 5-year gas strip to the left, around 275 flat NYMEX pricing out of the years. This well has a PV10 net to Merit of just over $300,000. That's a significant amount of money to our company, and we believe that if the Johnson is allowed to produce, it will significantly hurt us financially, and that is why we
You've heard some testimony from Mr. Oxley that this well is not economic, that it loses money for them. Would you agree with his characterization that this well is not economic?
I would not, and I would point everybody to Exhibit 5. This is the Belrose 1-10 net activity 12-month LOS, 12 months of actuals, with a 12-month average at the end, and then also forecasted cash flow at our current rates. So you can see that all but 1 month we were cash flow positive on this well, and that month happened to be our lowest realized NYMEX gas price in April of 2020. We're far better than that now where we were then. At 175 MCF per day, which our well shows we can flow that, and $3 gas, which we are close to today. That's not a $3 realized price, that's a $3 NYMEX price, so differentials are included here. We're forecasting a net operating cash flow of $7,600.
Right, there was some to-do made about the fact that your well, that they lose money because you charge the COPUS. Is the COPUS, is that number and what is charged, is that revenue that Merit realizes?
No, it's not revenue. It's not included in this exhibit because Merit doesn't view COPUS as revenue. Whenever you look at a well's economics, you can't, in my opinion, look at COPUS. The COPUS is overhead reimbursement for our professional services and our staff as operators of this well. It's been established by the JOA. We charge what XTO is charging, and it's adjusted according to the standards that COPUS sets forth. So we charge what the JOA states we should charge, and we adjust it accordingly according to COPUS's and adjust whether it is up or down. So again, this well cash flows without any kind of COPUS adjustment. If you look at only this well, if Merit was 100% working in each other in this well, we would without question continue to produce this for a long time because it cash flows. And I believe at the 275 out-of-year strip, it should produce over 30 years if things stay the way they are today. The last exhibit, Exhibit 7 is a gross activity LOS. This is just 100%. This is in rebuttal to the gross LOS that Oxley provided. This is Merit's gross LOS as if you had 100% working interest. And it shows that over the last 12 months, the well has cash flow $342. Again, that doesn't include paying our people and overhead. That is what the well does. At current rates, it's going to be north of $7,000. I'll point out that I won't speculate on exactly how long our well will hang in at 190 MCF per day. Next week, we may be talking about 250 MCF per day because we still haven't had a long run of pump run times in this well. I have it forecasted to deplete. We all know if we're operating and producing wells effectively, it will decline, and I want it that way. I'll also point out that the data that we've got on this Belrose well is more days of production than Oxley even had on their drill well. So the same thing could be said about the Johnson 4-10. There's only 2 days of production at 750. They're only 1,000 feet away from a depleted well that's been produced since 1994. There's a good chance that, again, they are producing the near wellbore high permeability, and in a month from now, that well could be doing 100 or less. There is, in my engineering opinion, that is possible.
All right, so just to put the finest point on it, in your opinion, based on the information you provided this commission, is the Belrose well an economic well?
Absolutely. It's without question.
Is it paying royalties to royalty owners now?
It is.
You heard the testimony from Mr. Oxley that, well, it's not that good a well, and if you let the Johnson produce, we can produce it faster. Is that a good enough reason to allow a well to come in and compete 1,000 feet?
That's not a good reason, because all you're doing is accelerating reserves. In my opinion, that's not what we're here to do. We're here to preserve the reserves and produce them over time, which we believe the Belrose well will in fact do. And if they were to produce the Johnson 4-10, we believe it will be producing the reserves at our well. Those are our reserves at 90% working interest. They will then be produced in their well at 0% in our rights merit. We will get nothing out of that well, and it's only 1,000 feet away in an area in the basin that's typically one well per section per reservoir.
Mr. Hennigan, based on your expertise and your knowledge of the geology and your engineering expertise, is the Johnson necessary to adequately drain the reserves in this unit? Is the Johnson necessary?
I don't believe so. And in fact, that's why we didn't go in on the well. We didn't consent the well because it makes no sense, in our opinion, in a sub $2 gas environment, which we were in last year when we got types of well proposals. It makes no sense for us to take that kind of risky step out to go 1,000 feet away from the well that we already have producing for free. Currently, without having to do any kind of development costs, it is producing that day. It's not a good financial decision for Merit to consent that work.
Based on your pump repair and the numbers you're seeing now, and if that continues, which you have every reason to believe it could for some time, does the Belrose well provide an adequate means to produce the reserves in this unit?
Absolutely.
That's what, oh, sorry.
No, it's okay.
No, that's what.
Shannon, try and point to you in reverse of what I just heard. With respect to the well, you testified that the Melrose well is generating royalty. Mr. Oxley's testimony was that the Melrose well is generating royalty. However, he calculated that, and the answer to the calculation is $200 a year on 640 acres. Do you disagree with that?
I didn't run the numbers myself, so I would need to do that to confirm it.
Do you have any basis to dispute those numbers? $200 a year for 640 acres.
I don't have any basis to dispute it, but I would like to run those numbers myself and see what they actually would be.
I think the hearing officer is probably going to not want to wait that long.
That would take long.
All right. On your exhibit 3, you projected NYMEX gas prices. What's the basis for that projection other than perhaps wishful thinking?
That's just on the NYMEX strip.
Okay. Now, if we go to Merit Exhibit 5, we notice that the actual realized gas price is about half the NYMEX price.
No, sir, you're referring to Exhibit 5.
Yes, I'm referring to Merit Exhibit 5.
Okay.
Where you have a row for realized gas price and a row for NYMEX gas price in several months of 2020. And what I'm seeing, eyeballing it, is your real price at the well end is about half that NYMEX.
And you're correct for the 12 months of historical data, because our differential is around 94 cents. That's what it's averaged in the last 12 months.
And so you.
And the NYMEX gas price during that time was $2.08 average over the last year. But as we know, we're closer to a $3 environment today. Those things aren't linear. Our differential should still be close to that 94 cent number, meaning that we're going to realize over $2 in MCF. Just if gas price doubles, your differential, your gathering rate does not double along with it.
And in order to make your economic model work, you've got to realize over $2 MCF, don't you?
I think we showed that we cash flowed at 208, so I'd have to run the break evens, but it could go lower.
I'll take that as I don't know.
No, I believe it's, I think in February 2020, NYMEX gas price was $1.88, we cash flowed $113.
How much a month are you paying for that compressor you put out there?
We own the compressor.
You do not have a compressor on board.
We own the compressor.
You own the compressor. How much do you intend to charge the participants for rental on the compressor?
Off the top of my head, I don't know because all of the compressor rental rates are based off of horsepower. I can't remember right now in this moment what the exact horsepower
And
is.
in your projections, you haven't put in anything for compressor rental.
Correct. And that's because we don't know if it will need a compressor or not. So what I'd like to say is the compressor test showed that production went up. Now, our bottom hole pressure is held back due to the hydrostatic column. Now that we put a pump in the well, we just lowered our abandonment pressure on the well, and we may not need that compressor. The compressor only lowered line pressure 20 pounds, and having several hundred feet of column of fluid is much more than 20 pounds of differential. So now that we've got the well top down, we are absolutely going to test to produce this well without running the compressor on. We can get the well to produce without the compressor, and that's what we will do.
But if the compressor stays out there, that's another thing.
If the compressor stays out there, I'll speculate that the cost should be near $1,000. And at my forecast, that would be that $100 net to Oxley, and this well is still cash flowing far beyond that, even with the compressor.
It actually costs you that too, doesn't it? You may own the compressor, but you have capital tied up.
Absolutely. If we
And
need
so
to-
it's costing you $900 a month in the use of an asset.
Sure.
Same thing with corporate overhead.
Correct, but I'm showing in my forecasted cash flow is $7,600. So I'll take 900 for 7,600 any day of the week.
Well, let's talk about overhead. You don't put overhead into your model because you don't pay overhead, you just charge overhead.
We
Right?
pay overhead to our employees. We haven't had a single day off.
And
in the
therefore, the
last several years.
profitability of a well to you should still have an overhead factor. But it's not in your model.
It is a overhead G&A type number. That's not a well level number. Merit has many assets throughout its company, and we employ a lot of people in Dallas. We pay overhead. I don't know exactly what those numbers are allocated back to this asset in particular, but we absolutely pay overhead, and that's why COPUS is put in place, because non-op owners aren't required to have that same amount of overhead. We've got geologists, we've got engineers, we've got accountants.
Well, and that's really complicated and sort of giving me the runaround that I expected. So my question is, does it cost you to have a well?
Yes,
And is the COPUS overhead not designed to compensate you for that cost?
yes.
Yet you have not put that into your economic projection.
That could be considered a corporate level LOS. We're talking, y'all accused us of our well not being
I mean, let
economic.
me ask
and
you
the
a
well is
simple
economic.
question. Is it in there or is it not?
It's not in this LOS.
It's not in there.
And I've looked many deals over my period of time, and many times it's not in there. It's a field level LOS.
That's all I
Correct.
have.
You're right. It's not-
Mr. Curry, I think we might have a little bit of brief direct.
Questions from the commission? Commissioner Wolfson.
So going back to the lower spiral, do you feel like your well is efficiently draining the lower spiral?
That would be a speculative answer. I would say the majority of the production likely comes from the upper, but I do know that fracs can grow hundreds of feet, and they see a really good load in that lower Spiro, but it's only 1,000 feet away. I mean, it's in the same quarter section. So if that frac goes out just a few hundred feet and 50 foot vertically, then we are likely producing those reserves. And we show development in the lower Spiro in our well. And honestly, we could go perforate that low, and it may be productive, and now I'm kind of motivated to do so.
When you are a non-operator in a well, you include the overhead rate as part of your cost.
We have it modeled as a COPUS overhead. Yes, sir.
So you would consider that a cost?
I would consider it overhead. I wouldn't consider it LOE.
But you consider it cost of the well?
For sure, but we're also getting ownership in a well that we don't have to have that same amount of overhead for. So,
But all I'm doing is just reverse
Sure.
circumstances.
yes,
So,
but
Is there any way that the Oxley well can produce that would cause you no harm?
I don't believe so. And I don't believe there's any way they can prove that it can. And I'm really confident that if they frack that well, not only if it doesn't, if the frack does not hit our offset well, the production that's being depleted will adversely affect our well. But based off of what I've seen in the past, I know they referenced horizontal stresses and directions that fracks propagate, but it's fairly common knowledge that if a reservoir has a certain maximum horizontal stress, that can be altered over time via depletion. The frack wants to go the path of least resistance. So you've got a massive pressure sink 1,000 feet away. I'm fairly confident that if they frack that well, not only will it hurt production, we may get fracked out and the well never make anything. I mean, it's possible after a frack hit, I think as people have seen, we can get hit with a flood of water literally after they start pumping and our well be gone.
So you see a risk of loss of your.
Absolutely. And I mean, it happens frequently too. It's not just speculation.
Part of their testimony was that your unit has suffered drainage from an offset unit in that lower spiral. Would you agree that that's occurred?
If they're all connected, then I'm sure, yes, that it's been driven with offset corrosion. But I haven't looked as in depth into the geology and the faults in the area as say the map would have. But you have to decide what spacing is appropriate to effectively deplete reserves. Well, you know you will see some depletion from a well that's a mile away. You still feel like you need to drill a well per section in order to effectively deplete the reservoir. But you never drill one, on a 100-acre spacing for 1,000 feet away to produce those amount of reserves. And yeah.
So I don't know, what kind of curious how y'all handle well proposals when you receive them. So Oxley had sent the well proposal to you. Did you model the spiral at that time to see, or was your assumption?
We did not, because they said they were going after a deeper test. And we didn't contemplate the possibility of them even perfecting a spiral because we knew the field rules stated they could not do so. We knew that our well was producing out of the spiral. If they told us, hey, we're going to go drill this well to 6,500 feet or whatever it is and produce the spiral, we would say absolutely not. But if you want to go propose a well and drill deeper, like 8,000 plus, and you find something in the hail, by all means, we just don't want to be part of it because we think that's too risky for our business model.
Was any part of the installation of the compressor and so forth time around this here? Was any of this work accelerated in order to meet the time?
Absolutely, it was, to be frank, because we've had this well teed up as opportunity, and here we are about to get cut out of our well, and somebody else is going to produce the reserves. And so we said, you know what, gas is now $3. Why don't we just go do this now? Because it says that it does not have the potential to produce 75. So why argue over the fact if it can or can't, whenever I can prove that it does, and it is current. That was our motivation.
That's all.
All right, so we have an issue.
Can I ask one question?
Hold on one second, I'll probably ask you a question, but I've got to let Patricia go because she has another engagement. Now, our options are, A, we can all come back next month, finish this up. B, we are recording this, it's going to be on via Zoom on the E&E YouTube channel. If everyone was speaking to a mic, then we may be able to get enough for Patricia to be able to do a transcript following the part that she's going to be missing. So that means that everybody now has to speak directly into a mic at this point going forward in order that we can hopefully have a good enough quality that she can be able to provide a transcript. It's not going to be, I can't guarantee that because we're kind of in untested territory. But there are other people listening right now, and everybody says that as long as we're speaking into mics, they can hear. That's what you're going to be able to hear on the recording. So, Tricia, I know you need to go. That's about the best I can do at this point.
Those mics at the table are very directional, so you'll have to make sure that you're speaking into whoever's speaking. Agree?
So I guess I'm asking both Merritt and Oxley, what is your preference of this?
You'd like to finish out?
How long will it take them to finish?
It's a good question. Probably another half hour, what I anticipate. Just have to, one of the last witness, I assume there's gonna be some closing and then some discussion upon the adjudication, so.
I'm gonna make a transcript from that. So I don't know how I can certify a transcript from that.
What's that?
I don't know how I can certify a transcript from that after I pressed it.
Well,
Because
it
this
would have
could,
to be a quality enough audio that you can still certify.
but we don't know
I know.
that. What will
I mean,
happen.
that's a risk that we would be taking if we continue on. So I'm just saying that we can try it that way. I don't have any good answers, so I guess I'm asking both parties, what's your preference?
I think our preference is to finish.
Even in the event that you can't certify a transcript because we can't get the last few minutes of audio here? Do we have a speaker in this room? Does anybody know what a speaker in this room is? We can put up recording devices that maybe can help supplement.
Do we know at this point, are we going to have a March hearing?
At this point, we're anticipating having a March hearing. It's scheduled, we don't know until we actually, we don't get any documents, but we obviously come back to this one. This one, you'll have to zoom in. All right. Staley, Rankin, do you want to finish?
Mr. Kirk, quite honestly, I mean, with there being uncertainty about the ability to use a certified transcript, should we need to appeal, that's something as the attorney for the client, I need to advise them that I might need. So I don't think I have any option but to say that I think it would be better to finish the stuff when I do have the guarantee that I'm gonna have a certified transcript.
All right.
How many more?
So I heard two of you can't, if you're here, you'll be via Zoom next week. That doesn't mean that you're not available.
Right. I'm not being just available. Possible, so.
Possible Zoom.
Yeah, possible. Exactly.
All right,
May I ask a question?
sure.
If Jim has, said what Jim has said, I'm not going to, tell you that you should ignore what he said, because I understand. But I think that we would both be well served if, we could get Trish to do this transcript to this point as quickly as she can, so we'll have that in advance of the March hearing, so we can remember who said what, which will, I think, focus and shorten our presentation.
I think that's probably an advisable request. All right, so.
I just hate to leave somebody hanging out there that doesn't know what the world's going on and why they're here for it.
Yeah, so at this point, we're going to continue this docket till the March hearing. I'm going to allow Tricia to leave. We will continue this. All right, so the two items left on the agenda, one is the staff document, and, discussing this with Director Bingle. He does not believe that there's anyone around justice, which is why it's abandoned it. He's willing to go forward without having to transfer. That's what you all have. Chairman Waters to serve as hearing officer. We have Phil who's going to present the staff application, and then we have the open topic portion of the agenda, which I know is Mr. Daly. Mr. Daly, we don't have a full reporter, so I would make a request to wait until the end of the March hearing and make the request at that point.
I want compromise between those two things. And that is, this doesn't need to be on the record, because I will make a request at the March hearing. However, I want the commissioners to understand so they can have the opportunity to think about what the request is. The request is specifically to allow conventional wells.
So we should move the microphone right here.
Specifically to allow conventional wells in B44, or at least the Bonanza Field part of B44, to be covered by General Rule B45, because it makes no sense to my client Oxley that you have a longer setback for conventional wells in the old Bonanza Field than you do in every other conventional field in the Arcola. And it all came about, I think, because at the time that B44 was adopted, the rules in B44 actually liberalized considerably setback requirements and density for the middle of Coconut, and made a bit of a lessening down to, I think, 1120 for conventional wells. But now conventional wells in the old Bonanza Field have a setback of 1,120 feet. Conventional wells every place else have a setback of 660 feet. I think that should be a non-controversial fix. As you've seen today, the Bonanza Field is, the production of the Bonanza Field is as mature as it is any place else in the Arcola. And all of the reasons which led to the adoption of B45 should be applicable there as well. Now, I'll make a formal presentation.
All right, so I'll note in the open document portion of the agenda that no other parties besides Mr. Daly presented themselves. Mr. Daly previewed a request that he is going to make formally at the March hearing. And you've heard that request, so thinking about it. Rick, you want to give any comments on that? You want to make that, or next month?
Let's wait till next month.
All right. So with that, we're going to move ahead with the staff. And would you mind presiding in this one?
This is Dr. Breakfast Center, hopefully get a 2021. Are there any recusals from this application? It's boarded. That's already previously water commission.
Member Seat, sir?
Yes.
All right. Thank you. For the commission today is a staff request for an order declaring Chandler Owens #1 well formerly operated by JMC Production Company abandoned under Arkansas law. The basis for the amendment request is under General Rule G1, specifically under sections 1A and 1D of General Rule G1, because there's been no oil or gas production that has occurred at this well for 2 years. And the operators failed to make any necessary payments of the annual well fee assessment in accordance with Arkansas law. The exhibits
that are included. There is Exhibit A, which is the Commission Form 1 Organization Report. Exhibit B is the affidavit of notice. Exhibit C is the copy of notice. Exhibit D is the proof of public notice on the newspaper. Exhibit E is the local production card, and I believe that exhibit shows there's been no reductions in the 80s. And there's recent photos of as well as questions. So commission staff is asking for this well to be abandoned in Arkansas.
Let me provide a little background. This was, it's in the middle of a sand gravel pit, as you can see. Well, it's got about 10 foot casing exposed, so it was an abandoned well prior to the sand gravel operation. The reason I wanted to go forward with the order this time is going with that well plug as quickly as possible. But the operator is deceased. I could have done this administratively, so the well process, but what we go through in that administrative process of contacting others, doing the newspaper, doing research, would have taken longer than having a hearing. That's why it's board hearing today. The operator is deceased. There's no record of any operations for a long period of time. That's it. My double jurisdiction did come into play here, so. My mining inspector inspected the, well, or the gravel pit, but the mining inspector is also an oil and gas inspector. So we filed a report on the well itself. So.
I'm just asking the exhibits be offered and accepted as evidence.
Exhibits are admitted to the record, and I'll make a motion to grant the application that we forfeit any non-financial insurance that operator currently has on file, and that the actual amount of cost of abandoned is less than the amount that we forfeit the difference between. Second by Commissioner Rice Roberts.
Let's vote.
All in favor? Passed by a vote of 8, Commissioner Thomas.
I didn't hear nobody say, but I believe he's deceased.
Yes.
Okay, I didn't think that. I'm pretty sure. Yeah.
All right, we'll move into the director's report. We have a few items.
A couple things on the minutes or as posted online, no questions, those stand as read and approved. The most important thing, we need to vote on 2 items. We can do a single vote. The one is the beginning of the year, so we need to approve payment of stipends as well as reimbursement for travel expenses. So we need a motion, second, and a vote on approval to pay those items.
Motion by Commissioner Walker. Second by Chairman Harley. All in favor, please raise your hand. That's 5 of 8. Commissioner Thomas, absent.
No other things other than the general review, things are going well with our operations. We have, as you recall, we have a emergency order that was passed 6 months ago. It will expire in March for the collection of the assessment for Royal. So that will expire in March. We in contact with the purchasers, so they know that. But we'll go ahead and notify them that the assessment, all assessments beginning in with the April payment.
April reporting, I believe, or April reporting. Assume that's probably March.
And the other thing is our budget went through legislature, they asked for the coming year, coming biennium. What we put in that for the first year, next fiscal year, we put a transfer of $10 million of our treasury fund into the abandoned well budget fund. We have about 420 or so wells, you guys them all the time. And plugging those out as well as some up north take most of that, but we wanted to get that fully funded. So that we have that money to go forward and get all those wells plugged.
Very happy, well, we plugged up the last.
We plugged, since we started the program in 2005, 720 something. We spent, I think, almost $9 million plugging those wells. I think we made, and we've made about 140,000 in salvage. Yeah. 140,000 in salvage.
That's my resume.
That's all I have. Any Shane, anything on the?
Just, I think you've all seen this via email, but, December was a good month in terms of, oil and gas litigation. We won at the circuit court level, both the flywheel case and Cambiano, thank you. Cambiano's, both of them have filed notices of appeal. Flywheel has requested that case to be transferred from what typically is the Court of Appeals to the Arkansas Supreme Court. I think the transcript was just lodged a week or so ago on that, so we're kind of waiting on correction. And then I assume the Cambianos will go to the Court of Appeals first. So I think for them in particular, it's, they don't have a lot of legal fees. When you do it yourself, I guess you can do more things like that. But, so both those appeals are pending. And, Alan's transferred out a few months ago now. He's fully in his water role, and glad to have Dan on picking up some of these cases. Dan was actually with both Alan and I at those hearings for Flywheel and Cambiano. So that's all I have in terms of legal update.
It's kind of interesting, the oil and gas commission being a relatively small commission in number, but we spent the last 5 years at the Supreme Court almost constantly.
What are you trying to say?
Small, but we have a lot of activity. The other thing I will say too is, one of my other duties, I think I've gone over this before, is as chief technical officer, I also work with the emergency management section here with FEQ. And we've been working on protocols, handling all gas spills. But we're working on one now that will clarify the jurisdiction between the Oil and Gas Commission and DEQ for spills from production facilities. Even though there's joint jurisdiction, works best to clarify who does what, so we don't do too much. So we'll be working on that. We've already had several instances where we're able to work out issues when an operator was jurisdiction, both agencies, one was in the water and then out of the facility. So that'll move along forward, and I think that'll help streamline in the future that issue.
Your turn. You are adjourned. Okay. I'll play behind you, man.
Oh, yeah.